morning for the launch of our new report, the $36 billion question, the economic and humanitarian consequences of extending Russia's oil waivers. I'm Dr. Ruth Gibson, and I'm a scholar at Stanford University. And today I am joined by my co-authors, Professor Francisco Rodriguez of the Center for Economic and Policy Research and the University of Denver, who led the quantitative modeling of this report, Katya Palevich of Razom for Ukraine, Xenia Farrington of San Francisco State University, and Dr. Benjamin Smith of the University of Pennsylvania's Kleinman Center for Energy Policy. So Russia needs money for its war, and oil and gas revenues are a primary way that Russia is sustaining its unjust war in Ukraine. General License 134B is set to expire at 12:01 a.m. Eastern on May 16th, a couple of days from now. And the findings of our research show that these general licenses would give Russia an additional $36 billion in oil exports between May and December of this year. And this money Putin would use to finance additional aggression against Ukraine. And in addition, these funds would flow primarily to major entities such as Gazprom and Rosneft, which are entities that have been linked by the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab to the forcible transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children, a policy that the United Nations has classified as a crime against humanity. And this is precisely why the United States Office of Foreign Asset Control, General License 134 series, must not be extended. So in our report, we outline alternatives to these general licenses: limited strategic petroleum reserve releases and expanded bypass pipelines, which can stabilize global energy markets without these general waivers, which are providing a financial lifeline of sanction relief to Russia. So today we will walk through our methodology, our key findings, and the humanitarian implications for what this means for Russia's war against Ukraine. And with that, I will pass it over to Professor Francisco Rodriguez, who will share with us his methodology and findings of his quantitative modeling. Professor Rodriguez, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gibson. And thanks to all of you for being here today and for this opportunity to discuss this very important foreign policy and humanitarian issue. I'm going to concentrate on discussing our quantitative findings and particularly how it is that we constructed our estimates. And to do so, I'm going to share a brief presentation that outlines our methodology and findings. Okay, so this presentation is concentrated exclusively on the methodological part of the report. And essentially what we try to do there is to estimate the fiscal impact on the Russian economy of either extending or allowing General License 134 to expire. And to do that, what we basically have to do is to construct two counterfactual scenarios, one of them in which the license is renewed. So what does this mean? This means that you continue having a permissive commercial environment that allows Russia to sell oil at a higher price. And the question is, how do you quantify that? And the other one is one in which it expires. And if it expires, then what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be going back to the type of regime of restrictions on Russian oil sales that has characterized the 2022 to 2025 period. And what's key here, a key difference between these two scenarios are really two basic differences. One of them has to do with price and the other one has to do with quantities. So in terms of price, what we find is that the periods in which Russia has been allowed to sell oil are periods without much restrictions, are periods in which it's able to sell at a price which is much closer to the international price of a marker basket of Brent oil. Whereas in the periods in which this has been restricted, such as the 2022 to 2025 period of wartime sanctions, then there is a spread that is Russian oil is sold at a discount to Brent, and that effect is of approximately $13 difference between the two different scenarios. But there's also not just a price issue, then there's also an issue associated with volumes of production. When the sales of Russian oil are restricted, that means that the opportunity for the growth of production and the growth in market access is also radically different. And that means that in the scenario of expiration, we are talking about a different trajectory in terms of production. Obviously, scenario of renewal is a much more favorable trajectory. Scenario of expiration is a much more adverse trajectory for Russia. So, just very briefly, these are data sources. We use publicly available data from U.S. Energy Information Administration, OPEC annual statistical bulletins, IMF World Economic Outlook. All of our results can be easily replicated, and our methodology is available for anybody who wants to do so. Just email me and I'll be happy to share the source data files. So what do we find? Well, this is interesting. What we find is that the spread between Brent and Urals oil, so this is essentially, and what this tells you is how much cheaper is Urals oil relative to Brent. So at how large a discount is Urals oil sold? We can see that in the period between 1993 and 2013, the spread was around $2 a barrel. In the period of the first set of sanctions, the Crimea era sanctions, it was actually not very different. It was actually slightly lower. It was a spread of less than $1 a barrel. So what this is telling us is that very circumscribed sanctions, such as the ones that were implemented after the annexation of Crimea, didn't really make that much of a difference. What did make a difference were the more comprehensive sanctions that were implemented after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. For the 2022 to 2026 period, we see an average spread of nearly $14 a barrel. So, and this is a significant cost to the Russian economy and to the Russian government. But we also see production effects. It's not just an issue of prices, it's also an issue of production. Whereas before any sanctions were implemented, you saw very rapid production. This was production growth. This was lower when the first restricted sanctions were implemented, and it was and you see a very significant decline, year-on-year decline in production during the period of wartime era sanctions. So the sanctions, the real binding sanctions, which are the ones of what we call the period 3 there, are sanctions that affect both prices and production. And what we try to do is put this in our modeling. Just want to briefly show you two graphs. One of them shows the evolution of this spread over time. And there again, you see our main story. The 2014 sanctions had basically no effect on the spread. The 2022 sanctions did have an effect on the spread. Now, what we find also is that if we look at more high frequency data, what we find is that the 2026 granting of general licenses is clearly associated with a decline of the spread. So in other words, these general licenses effectively work as a lifting of sanctions on Russia, and I think that's an important takeaway here. According to our modeling, this spread is declining asymptotically to zero. So what that effectively implies is that Russia is able to sell oil. The data is telling us that Russia is now able to sell oil, at least in the period since the granting of the general licenses, in conditions that approximate those of a no sanctions environment. So so then we take this finding and we incorporate this into quantitative estimates, looking at Russian export volumes over the periods of our modeling, and that's how we reach this number of 36.1 billion. That is the difference between the revenues that Russia will have if General License 134 is renewed, and those lower revenues which it will have if it is allowed to expire. And this reflects, as I mentioned, both a price effect and a volume effect. It reflects the fact that if a general license 134 is allowed to expire, Russia will be selling at a lower price, and it will also be facing a more challenging environment to sell its oil, and therefore will its production growth rate will be lower. So our main takeaways, the first one is that these spreads in Russian oil prices are reflecting policy factors. They're not reflecting market forces. Market forces effectively do impact on them, but we're seeing very clear inflection points associated with these policy actions. They operate both through the price and volume channels, and the fiscal stakes are very significant from a macroeconomic standpoint. $36 billion in 8 months is on the order of 2% of Russian GDP and 13% of total exports. This is a material contribution to the budgetary resources available to Moscow. With that, I close my presentation and pass it over to Katya Pavlevich.
Thank you so much, Professor Rodriguez. I think that what you point out, that this is the equivalent of lessening sanctions against Russia, is a paramount importance for those joining us today, and just the monumentous increase in GDP that this is offering Russia. So with that, I'd like to, Katya, thank you so much for joining us today. Katya will be speaking more broadly about what is happening in Ukraine and the implications of Russia's war against Ukraine, not only for the forcibly transferred Ukrainian children that have been implicated from these various oil companies, but also more broadly about what these sanction waivers are financing. And with that, I turn it over to you, Katya. We can't hear you. I think
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Great.
Apologies for this. Thank you so much for organizing the conversation. And it is, however, very ironic to speak about the humanitarian impact of sanctions on Russia, because literally right now, as we speak, there is a statewide missile and drone alert in Ukraine, because Russia today has already launched more than 700 drones, mostly targeting the western parts of Ukraine. And missiles are expected to follow the drones. And I'm literally monitoring if any of them hit native town in Ukraine. My name is Katya Pavlevich. I am from Ukraine originally, and right now I serve as an advisor at Razum for Ukraine, a nonprofit where I lead a campaign focused on the return of Ukraine abducted children. And at the first glance, the abduction of children may seem like a separate issue from the sanctions and energy policy, but they are actually very interconnected, because the abduction of Ukrainian children is part of Russia's overall war machine, the same machine that destroys Ukrainian infrastructure, bombs civilians, persecutes Christians, tortures prisoners of war. And this machine is funded by the Russian state that employs Russian war criminals. This machine is responsible not only for abduction of more than 20,000 Ukrainian children, but also for killing more than 700 and wounding more than 2,500 children. Right now, there seems to be a belief in some parts of Washington that the machine can be taken out of equation when it comes to dealing with Russia, and then it can be moderated through diplomatic negotiations or concessions. But all the evidence point to the opposite. Russia is not being deterred, and it's been encouraged. The facts speak for themselves. According to the UN, which provides very conservative estimates, 2025 became the deadliest year for Ukrainian civilians since Russia's full-scale invasion. Especially the record number of women were killed. Civilian casualties only increased in 2025 more than 30% compared with 2024. And this trend continues in 2026. In March, we see 2026, we see almost 50% increase of civilian casualties compared to March of last year. And Russia's attacks continue to escalate. For example, in July last year, a record largest aerial attack on Ukraine took place. Russia launched more than 700 drones and 13 missiles overnight. This is not the behavior of the regime that is looking for peace, but a regime that believes it has room to escalate. And we cannot separate Russia's war machine from its business or political establishment, because in Russia, major companies do not operate independently. They become tools of the regime. They fund the regime's priorities and become accomplices of regime's crimes. And we do know that, according to Yale's Humanitarian Research Lab, that there are Russian energy companies directly involved in transporting more than 2,000 Ukrainian children to re-educational camps. But this problem is not limited only to those two companies. Russia's energy sector, as was mentioned before, is the largest contributor to Russia's federal budget, and that money funds Russian policy priorities. One of those priorities is militarization of youth, militarization of Ukrainian children. In 2026, Russia budgeted roughly $1 billion for so-called youth policy, which is 80% more than they budgeted in 2022. Significant portion of that funding supports paramilitary organizations and indoctrination like Young Army and the Movement of the First. They are both banned by the US and sanctioned, and because they are responsible for militarization of at least 388,000 Ukrainian children under occupation. So when we talk about Russian oil revenue, we're not talking about an abstract financial issues. We're talking about money that sustains same systems that re-educates children, abducts them, bombs civilians, and tortures people. This is why the OFAC's general license is so damaging. It doesn't only enable Russian war crimes, but undermines the work that the US administration and Congress already is doing. We know by the involvement of the First Lady, who's appealed the return of 26 children with families. Little an hour ago, Congress forced a vote through discharge petition to support, among other things, sanctions on the Russian oil industry. And meanwhile, we see the Treasury Department is allowing Russia to continue its policy. This only seems like mixed messages, mixed signals from DC, and we see that one part of the government is trying to bring children home, and another part is giving Putin financial breathing room. If we allow it, Putin will keep using Ukrainian children as bargaining chips, will continue terrorizing Ukrainian civilians to get a better position in negotiations. And this has to stop, and the only way to disrupt this system is to cut off its finances. This position of Putin is not a leverage for America, and we need to get leverage on Russia. Our policies on Ukraine and on Russia should be aligned with our actions. If we're serious about saving children, protecting civilians, we must put maximum pressure on Putin and on the system that sustains his crimes. That's why, as someone who works on the humanitarian aspect of this invasion, I do understand and encourage the very direct economic decisions that put pressure on the regime. These issues cannot be isolated and dealt separately. They're a big picture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katya. And I invite members of the audience to enter any questions you may have into the chat function. And the next time we do this together as a team, as we continue to track the political decisions made around these general licenses, we will do it in a forum where we can unmute you as audience members so that you can ask the questions live. So next time we convene, we will do it in that format. But for now, please enter any questions that you may have into the chat. So the question is, how will the report be distributed and who will be reading it? The report has been published on Stanford University's websites. I put the link there at the Center for International Security and Cooperation. It will also be published on the Stanford Digital Repository, which will keep that report for all time. But for now, if you click on that link, you can download the PDF and report. We're going to be getting this report over to policymakers. It's being sent to people at OFAC in terms of sharing these findings to make sure, in hopes that the general license series will not be renewed. Professor Rodriguez, do you have one final comment before we sign off our session for today?
No, I mean, just to reiterate, these effects that we have found are very significant economically, and it's important to reiterate that given the structure of the Russian economy, oil revenues, as Katya was also underscoring, are essentially what feeds the government budget. So if we're trying to discuss alternatives that will restrict government actions, well, governments have restrictions on what they do that emerge from the resources that they have available to them. And in the case of Russia, very clearly that link comes from oil. There are, of course, broader issues that are relevant in terms of ensuring adequate supply of oil to the world economy, and we consider those in the report. Now, these have, in my view, to be analyzed from a standpoint that takes into account long-run constraints, goals, and objectives, and this effectively implies thinking about long-run availability of sources of energy and framing a long-run strategy to ensure that those sources are available in a way that is conducive and compatible with sustainable growth of the world economy.
Thank you, Professor. The expiration timeline is May 16th at 12:01 Eastern. So that's when it's set to expire, this current general license. Into the chat, I have entered our contact information. Katya is available to answer additional questions that the audience or journalists may have related to the humanitarian implications of this. Professor Rodriguez, as he shared, is leading the quantitative modeling. And we are grateful to all of those who joined us online today and those who are listening after the fact for being a part of this report launch. And with that, I thank all of you for attending, and we will reach out again as these events continue. Thank you.